Well, welcome to the University of Sydney. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Shakespeare FuturEd. I've been trying different pronunciations of that. Shakespeare Futured, Shakespeare FuturEd, I'm not quite clear. But the third lively conference in the series. And I think you know that these conferences draw together groups of educators, both secondary and tertiary, theatre practitioners, people interested and passionate about education and particularly Shakespeare education. So welcome to you all. But first, an acknowledgement of country. As a dean, I make what seems like an awful lot of acknowledgements of country, and I'm pretty sure some of you sitting here have that experience of making acknowledgements of country, or at least hearing them made. And so one of the tasks that arises for me is how to make acknowledgements of country seem authentic and in the moment, as opposed to something rote and formulaic that we sort of get through on the way to the real thing. So one of the things I'd like to do is just invite you to think about what it means to make an acknowledgement, what it means to acknowledge something. And it's turned out to be important for me to think of it as something, not some form of words that I say up the front, even though I do that, but something that we do kind of collectively, like we make an acknowledgement of something. Some of you coming here today might have walked past the new social sciences building that opened just late last year, the first faculty building, our first new faculty building for our faculty since 1852. So a very exciting benchmark for us. And you might or might not have noticed an absolutely monumental work of art on the outside facing wall of that building. You might be thinking, how would we have not noticed a monumental work of art? It's the work of a young Indigenous artist, Robert Andrew. It's called Garabara. It's absolutely enormous, about 8 metres by 6 metres, I think, but very recessive. It's possible to walk daily in that space and never really notice it. But I would really urge you, if you have a break in the conference, to go over and stand in the courtyard and have a look at that work, Garabara, which comes from the Sydney language word for a word that we think of in English as corroboree. The word is kind of etched into the granite face of the building, quite lightly, so it's hard to, it doesn't jump out as a sort of a word necessarily, maybe some dark shapes, and it's indented all throughout the letters with little metal pellets of iron, which are sending down rusty and oxidising stain down the front of the building. And that the artist doesn't even know how much that will happen over time, to what degree, perhaps it will even come and flow down on the pavement. It's a kind of a living work. It's a very exciting thing. And I thought Andrews describes what he thinks Garabara means, and he describes it in a way that I think this Shakespeare FuturEd conference is also a good instantiation of, because he says he thinks of it in terms of storytelling and the passing of knowledge and knowledge systems to the initiated, the uninitiated, and to other groups and clans from different geographical areas. And certainly I can kind of see a resonance for what the Better Strangers project has been doing in the more than decade of its existence, and that definition of Garabara. So on your behalf then, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we stand, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It's on the Gadigal's ancestral lands that the University of Sydney was built, land that was never sold and never ceded. And today, as we come together, and tomorrow, to advance thinking about education in relation to Shakespeare, we pay respect to the knowledges embedded forever within Aboriginal custodianship of country. The Better Strangers project, Will's introduced the key members of this project team. What is this notion of better strangers? It's taken, as I guess many of you know, from Orlando's insult in As You Like It, when he says, "I do desire we may be better strangers." And it's given a new kind of energy here, I think. The history to the Better Strangers project is available on the Shakespeare Reloaded website, a website that I'm pretty sure you'll be familiar with, and if you're not, would really encourage you to spend some time there. And I think it gives us a clue as to what Better Strangers might mean in a non-insulting sense. There it says the project's aim is to make the teaching and learning experience for teachers and students refreshingly strange via innovative approaches arising from creativity studies, complexity theory, and tertiary secondary education collaboration. Perhaps Better Strangers also points to the possibilities of productive partnerships between people and groups of people who do not have to be like each other to succeed in a joint educational venture. High school teachers and university academics, for instance. Barker College and the University of Sydney have partnered since 2008 in this project, and it's had kind of a history of very different cumulative chapters, I guess. And I think the Better Strangers vibe, that idea that things can be accessible to others, a desire to be accessible to others who are not necessarily in your network of familiars, I think that is evident in this conference in a number of ways. It's registration free, for a start. Like the Shakespeare Reloaded website, which makes all of its teaching resources and all of its research publications on an open access platform. And finally, I think the fact that this conference is accredited by NESA, so that practicing teachers, many of whom are in their first busy week of the teaching year, can use this conference as part of their professional development. I think that's a great definition of Better Strangers. It's a sort of a dean's curse that she gets to open a number of events that she would like to stay for the duration of. It's also sometimes a pleasure that the dean can skip out of things that sometimes look intolerable. But I have to say, given that my own disciplinary background is English literature, this would be something that would be a complete treat for me to stay and participate in, but I won't be doing that. But I do urge those of you who tweet to use the hashtag for the conference. There's a lively discussion already ongoing on Twitter before the conference even started, mostly posts from people moaning that they can't choose between fabulous sessions and things to go and see. So I will be consulting that over the next few days and very much would like to see it take off as a record of how the conference went. So welcome and enjoy your 2 days on campus.